What's up, STS Nation, and welcome to another episode of Surviving the Survivor, the podcast that promises to bring you the very best guests in true crime. It's not a tagline, it is our reality that we live every day, the best guests in true crime. And guess what? Great Scott, it's time for your True Crime Phil. A show so good, it happens live every Friday, sometimes at 12:30, but when Fil Waters is chilling out in Hawaii, it happens at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Best guest today, America's most respected detective, Fil Waters. Speaking of him, he spent decades in law enforcement, becoming an expert at obtaining criminal confessions, 23 years as a homicide detective in the Houston PD, investigating more than 400 homicide cases. So if you think you know more than Fil about that, you probably don't. He's also a Marine and the owner of Kindred Spirits Investigations and starred in the show The Interrogator. Meanwhile, we've got Agent Scott Duffey looking very refreshed on this Friday, unlike myself. He is now director of Wilmington University's Criminal Justice Institute, Professor Scott Duffey. He formerly was an FBI agent with the Delaware division. I don't know if you call it a division, but in Delaware is where he worked. He handled crime matters, gangs, bank robberies, fugitive task force cases. He did that for 20 years. Prior to that, he was a Pennsylvania police officer before that. And look, right out of the gates, we've got catch up. Hello, aloha, happy Friday, STS fam. Phil, did you hear about the Hawaiian monk SEAL named Malama who's intentionally killed by blunt force trauma in Ohikolo a few days ago? That's being investigated by NOAA. Fil Waters, right out of the gates, a question for you.
Yeah, I had not.
I got to be honest. I thought that was a joke. Like she was about to tell you a joke.
No. I'm sure it is not. And I'm looking now at my Hawaii news to see if there's anything about that. I had not heard about that. So
look, when you take care of the land and play with your horses and hang out with Nugget, you don't stay up on all the. Where is Nugget, by the way?
Nugget is right here.
The only one doing less than Phil is Nugget, obviously, in this world.
Come here, Nugget. Okay.
Here
we will say, here's Nugget. Nugget's gonna say
for all those who think that Phil is a tough guy, look at this.
She's a little camera shy, and she doesn't really like to be held. So, but here she is. There's Nugget. There's Nugget.
I'm waiting for Scott to bring out a giant Doberman pinscher, but Scott, are you a dog guy?
Yeah, I have one. She's upstairs.
She's upstairs? Big, small? What is it?
Yeah, she's pretty big. She's a mixed. I couldn't tell you even what, I've heard so many different what she is, but she's a rescue, and she's our second rescue.
Very nice. Very nice. Dom's mom says, hello, Joel, Phil, Scott, and awesome STS Nation. Happy Friday. I'm drinking, Phil will make fun of me, all natural root beer. Ooh. It's keto.
No, I love that stuff. I'm an old root beer guy, man. In Tulsa, we had A&Ws, and
yeah, but this is unfortunately at 0 calories, so it doesn't taste quite like it should. But what can you do?
Well, that's no good. What's the point?
Yeah, exactly. Jody Johnson, Friday's the best. First STS with Joel, Scott, and Phil, then OP Live. Phil, do you sit there, by the way, on a Friday night and watch On Patrol Live? Do you watch? Are you a fan of cops and these cop shows?
That would be negative. So to be full disclosure, I mean, when I was a younger man and weighed probably 20 pounds less and could bend steel with my bare hands, that kind of thing. Baby Cop. I watched all that stuff. Cops. In fact, when I was working narcotics, we were on the local version of Cops on Fox. So I used to watch that stuff, but now it's like, after 33 years of doing it, I don't get as much out of it because I dealt with those people.
It's like
well, I guess to a degree, I'm still dealing with those people, but
yeah.
It's
It's a been there, done that kind of thing for you.
Yeah.
How about you, Scott Duffey? Were you a fan of the show Cops, and do you watch On Patrol Live?
I did, and I remember seeing Houston, and of course, I always took interest when it was in a location. I had like Philadelphia. I enjoyed the New York episodes and some of the Southern, but yeah, I did enjoy them. And then once they went off, and then kind of went on. I think they're streaming now or whatever. Kind of leveled off of it.
Look at this. I am not paying. STS Nation has the best guess. It's a fact. That is a fact. We had some amazing shows this week. We did one on a possible serial killer in the Northwest. Scott Duffey, do you know a former agent, a retired agent, Greg McCrary? He's a bit of a legend. FBI. Have you ever heard?
Yeah, is it Craig McCrary?
It's Greg with 2 G's. Yeah. Greg McCrary, but we had him on the show. He joined the FBI in 1969. He's written books. He set up some sort of classification manual for crimes. Interesting guy, very smart. It's a very, very fascinating show, if I may say so myself. Tali from Israel, happy Friday, STS. This week was such a great week. Look at this. Right, she's mimicking what I just said. With an amazing bunch of shows and definitely the best of guests, Fil and Scott are the perfect way to close the week. So how about that? And then, of course, one of my all-time favorite names, Shaquille O'Neal, of course, the real one. And then Phil's counterpart in Hawaii, Catherine Regier. Happy Aloha Friday. Joel Scott and STS Nation. Sally reminding everyone to hit the like button. And there we go. We are going to discuss for a little bit the evildoer, otherwise known as Bryan Kohberger. As you know, when we do that, I like to remember the victims here. So let us never forget. Madison Mogan, 21. Kaylee Gonzalez, 21. Xana Kernodle, 20. And Ethan Chapin, 20. There's actually some news about all this. I know how Phil feels about it, but we're going to discuss it anyway. Julie Frew says, hey, SCS, it was my birthday yesterday. I need a happy birthday from Scott and Phil. Ha, ha, ha. Scott and Phil, do you care to wish Julie Frew in the UK a happy birthday?
Oh, absolutely. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
There you go. You got your happy birthday from me to you, Julie. Enjoy your day. So Kohberger, his lawyers, Fil Waters, they filed some motions in court saying that there is a movement afoot for what they call mob justice, and they are now completely objecting to television and social media commentators dissecting video, so they no longer want a camera close to that courtroom. Do you agree? Would you be doing the same thing if you were their attorneys? And by the way, Laura, hey, what's up? No Hawaiian shirt today, Phil? It's a blue shirt.
It is a Hawaiian shirt. So it is an Aloha shirt. So let me it's a little on the lower spectrum of things today, but this is an Aloha shirt.
Laura, there you go. Lest anyone think is, and look at this misdemeanor. Hey, Duff, looking good. Love it. Don't let the wife see that, Scott. So Phil, I assume you agree with the attorneys here. They do not want cameras anywhere near this courtroom.
Well, you know how I feel in general about cameras in the courtroom, but so I would say I would have to agree. I think that's something that I would be in agreement with them about that. Sure.
And Scott Duffey, the lawyers said that terms have been used such as cold iciness, demon, and that it is potentially tainting a jury pool. And they went on to say, the lawyers, however much it may help the horrific pain of the victims' families, so they're calling out the families too, to scream at the system, their alternative, mob justice, is far worse. It helps nothing to come to court assuming guilt. What about that? That they're kind of taking a little bit of a pot shot, maybe at the Gonzalez family, who has been speaking a lot to the media, and I think spoke to the media just last night, if I'm correct.
Yeah, I mean, we live in a free society, free speech, and of course in a digital media where we pretty much have lots of different outlets that are just people get on and voice their opinions, and that's exactly what they are, their opinions, and nothing more. So what ultimately will come into a courtroom will be presented, rightfully so, by a prosecutors, and the state will put on their case. The defense will defend as best as they can, and the jurors will be told, you may or may not have heard things, and whatever you might have heard, set them aside, and whatever you hear today and this day forward in the courtroom is what you will pay attention to and ultimately judge on. So it's, kudos to, yes, there are some things that probably shouldn't be said or whatnot, but it ultimately comes down to free speech. That's our society, and we have to respect it.
And Julie Frew says, look at this, very interested in Phil's take on cameras for BK and motions today. As you heard, Fil is not a fan of the camera when it comes, even though he is quite photogenic, he does not want a camera in that courtroom. Fil Waters, I got to admit, I'm a little out of it on this Friday. I need this weekend here badly, and luckily it's here momentarily. But Ethan Chapin, of course, he's one of he's a triplet, and his mother, Stacy Chapin, obviously a victim from Moscow, Idaho. His mother, Stacy Chapin, was on the Today Show this week, Fil Waters, and said that he was really the glue that kept this family together. She says, and I quote, when you have triplets, you have this compelling sense of fairness. Ethan never played favorites. He didn't care who the best player was on the team or the last player on the team. He just loved playing. And she wrote a children's book that is now out called The Boy Who Wore Blue, because they looked so much alike as little kids. She had to put a certain shirt on to identify him, the boy who wore blue. What about the kind of the extra sadness associated with the fact that these triplets were now, ripped apart by this evildoer?
That's a trauma that none of us would understand if we were not twins or triplets, that kind of thing. And when I was in high school, there were a couple of friends of mine, twins, Lee and Dee Peitzel. And one of them, Lee, died in front of their house. They were out in front of the house on the roadway, and there were cars out there, and he was between two cars. I think one of them was broken down, whatever. They were trying to fix it, and somebody rear-ended the car behind him and drove him into the car he was between and killed him. And I can tell you, and we were all in high school together, and that was a horrific event throughout the school, and of course for Dee and his family and so forth and so on. So I've got to just having that interaction in that type of a situation. This one, certainly a loss is horrible, but this situation in which this loss occurred, it makes it certainly much more horrific for that family. So, that's I think that's something that's unexplainable unless you were in that situation.
You investigated over 400 homicides. Can you recall any victims either being twins or triplets, anything of the sort?
No, off the top of my head, I do not. I don't think I ever had a homicide where that was that was a factor.
And Fil, how difficult is it to notify a family? Is it what we see? Is it what we see in the movies and on TV? Do you walk up with your partner, knock on the door, and say, may I come in? May I speak to you? And how do you approach that?
Well, that is pretty accurate, because that's exactly what we do. That's one of the worst parts of the job, is making those notifications, and I've made a lot of them. And the response, well, first of all, when my partner and I knocked on that door, and it's most of the time it's going to be in the early morning hours. And everybody knows that if the police are knocking on your door at 3:00 in the morning, that's not good. There's nothing that there's going to be good that they're going to tell you. So, and my approach was always just to be as compassionate as I could, but as straightforward, because again, they know when they open that door that I'm about to tell them something that they never thought they would hear in their lifetime. And it's, once it is said, I've seen people react in different ways. I've seen those that have just melted into the floor without making a sound. I've seen folks that throw themselves on the floor in just blood-curdling screams of anguish, and then everything in between. So my duty at that point is to try to offer some compassion, offer them prayers, and try to give them some calm at that moment. But it's tough to do, and it's my least favorite thing to have done as a homicide detective.
Is there like a window or period of time that you have to inform the family? Would you always go straight from the scene to tell the family?
I have. Now, there have been times where we have not been able to identify that person at the scene. And so the medical examiner, who the body belongs to, will verify their identity through fingerprints and whatever other resources that they might use. And then at that point, once the person is positively identified, then they will notify, the medical examiner will notify the next of kin. And they do that over the phone. So, I mean, it's a more sterile communication, certainly.
Wow. I don't envy that. Lorna McKenzie, yay nugget, love nugget, hey nugget, hi nugget, hiya nugget, aw nugget, aloha nugget. Look at this. Nugget love, nugget heart, nugget, you're a good dog, aloha nugget. This guy, look how much attention this guy gets. It's like my mother, this guy.
And it's a girl dog. So it's my, I call her my caller. I refer to her. I very rarely call her Nugget. I usually refer to her as my little big dog.
Little big dog. She's like my mom. Does none of the work, gets all the accolades. Look at that. She's just sitting there snoring. Misdemeanor says, I love Duff. What a soothing voice and personality, followed by Scott is in his bunker. Scott, yes. Do you have MREs in there, those meals ready to eat in abundance in case there's an apocalypse?
I am ready. I'm always at the ready. Soup cans and everything.
Look at this. We're bringing up nostalgia. Jersey Gen Cristaldi. I remember the A&W root beer stands. A&W root beer flavor. Used to have A&W root beer stands in New Jersey, which I'm sure Scott Duffey has seen, especially down at the shore. And then we've got love from Cape down here. Scott Duffey, to you, back to this book, The Boy Who Wore Blue. The mother went on to say, by the way, there's a crazy storm out here in Miami. So if you see me go dark, you know why. And it'll be an earlier weekend than expected. But hopefully the power will hang on. It's a different dynamic, she says, in our home without Ethan, but we work on it every day. And she goes on to say he was definitely the glue that kept all of us together. He was funny and inclusive, and he always made sure that his brother and sister were included and loved. He was born with the kindest soul. Again, any and all of these are tragic situations, but just this dynamic of being one of three in terms of being a triplet, does it add to sort of the pain. And the mother already said that she will not be attending the trial. I think it's too difficult for her.
Oh, I definitely any dynamic, and every family is so unique. So, as Phil's saying, a triplet, a twin, and then to one of them to be ripped apart from that family dynamic, absolutely. But each and every one of them is suffering an unfathomable loss, and everybody deals with their pain in so many different ways to try to get through each and every day. So it's and I totally understand those that do not want to go into the courtroom. They'll wait for whatever the verdict is, and whether it brings them comfort or not, or some sort of closure. It's each and every victim family member will have to deal with it in their own sort of way to find that peace. And it is unique to each and every one. It's a very difficult, and as Phil has done it, I've done it just a few times, and that was more so if there was a terrorist act or something that the FBI was involved in another state, and we were simply being the local FBI office to make a family notification. It's very heart-wrenching, and you want to just be there, and whether somebody grabs you, hugs you, or falls down, whatever it is, you're just trying to be ready. But we had our victim witness coordinators. They're clinical social workers, and they're there to help just kind of put those steps forward for them in their healing process.
Yeah, which I don't know if you ever fully heal. I don't think you do. STS.
Well, let me say something here since we're on this topic about notification. Sure. So the other side of that same coin is the phone call that I've made to the family when we have the right person who's done the wrong thing to their family, their loved one, in custody and charged. So that's the other side of that same coin, that those phone calls are priceless.
Yeah, that must be a great feeling. STS Nation, take your lead from Perpetua Sridharan and follow along and ask questions. She wants to know from the great Fil Waters, has the transition from homicide cop to private investigator been a big change? And also, Phil, do you like the use of the word cop, or do you prefer a police officer? Some police are sensitive to that.
No, the term cop is constables on patrol. That comes out of England, but I don't. I think it's more of the way it is said. So I have referred to myself and others that I've worked with as homicide cops, and I have no issue with that. And I've heard people refer to police officers in general. I mean, I've even said myself that I spent 33 years as a cop and 23 years as a homicide cop. So I think it's the way it is said. It's the inflection. And I have heard, people say, "You're just a cop," so it's all about the way it is said. And that's, so I'm not offended, no. But to answer her question, has the transition been a big change? Only from the perspective that a lot is challenged by some of my colleagues when I opened up the private investigation company, that I had gone to the dark side. And because I do a lot of work for defense attorneys. So I have reconciled that in this way. And this has been my response to them, is that I'm not doing anything different now than when I was a homicide cop. It was always letting evidence lead me where I need to be, not taking it some direction I want it to go. And it's always a journey for the truth. So I'm doing the same thing here. And when I work for defense attorneys, I tell them straight out, look, I'm not a ringer. I'm not going to come in here and give you the information or give you the information in a way that is manipulated so that you can hear what you want to hear. And I've not had one tell me they don't want me working for them. In fact, they appreciate that approach, that I am straightforward, and I'll give them the good, bad, and the ugly. If their client is screwed, I'll tell them that. If we've got some problems here that the police did do or they didn't do, I'll tell them that as well. And then they can take the information and they can fashion their defense based on the evidence and on my investigation. So it's not a quid pro quo situation. I'm just doing the same thing that I've always done. So so that aspect of the transition was not hard.
Fil Waters, are you ever going to fully retire? Is there ever going to come a time where you just wake up, you don't surveil anyone, you just pet your horses and cradle nugget and just walk through the pastures of Hawaii with nothing else to do?
I don't know. I'd like to. Of course, this will get them going. I'm obedient to God's plan for me, and at whatever point in time that occurs, then that's when that'll occur. But I don't project into the future of I've got this date and time that I'm going to do this and that. So you're working unless it changes because of an almighty power. You're taking your cues from God. But right now your plan is to keep working. Is that correct? His plan is that I keep working at this point.
Got it. Man, be scared to be one of Phil's kids, maybe. Raul Thomas.
They would probably agree with you.
Yeah. Brian wants the Brian wants the cameras. Do you agree with that, Scott Duffey? Do you think Bryan Kohberger does want cameras in there? Is he a bit of a narcissist that wants everyone to see what is happening and his lawyers are saying no, no, no?
Yeah, I don't know enough about him. I mean, I know there's a lot of digging into his past. I'm just not quite sure what he is about. So I'm not sure if he actually would be one of those in front. But if he's a narcissist, right, then of course, the spotlight is always a big thing. But I don't know enough about him to make that judgment. But I would enjoy a camera inside that courtroom. I will say that, and I would, and because I can't be there myself, I would like to have eyes in there and be able to watch. So
you're just a law enforcement voyeur there.
Mm-hmm. I am. Yeah.
He admits it. Shelley Raposa's Fil Waters question. She has a question. Sick of people suggesting the evildoer has been framed and is innocent of these crimes. Is there plausible doubt of guilt, Fil Waters? The guy is engaged in too many suspicious behaviors. A lot of cyber sleuths out there who have these theories about a drug house, et cetera, et cetera. But what about Shelley Raposa's question about plausible doubt of guilt, Phil?
Well, I would say at this point, the obvious answer is that the prosecution and the detectives and the agents that have worked this case have accumulated enough evidence that they believe that they will have a successful prosecution, and this guy will be found guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And that's the way the system works. And again, I'll emphasize here again, he's presumed innocent until proven guilty. He does not have to make himself not guilty. He doesn't have to prove that he's not guilty. The burden of proof is on the prosecution to prove that he is beyond a reasonable doubt. So to say, is there any plausible doubt and that kind of thing? People are going to have their own opinions, and they're very strong. Either direction. I think the ones that are, I keep an open mind about these things, and then when I see the evidence lead me to the direction I need to be going, then I'll offer my opinion about it. and in the context of the discussion. So, we're going to see. We're going to see what they have. And then those folks that are so vehemently on the other side of this, that he's innocent and he didn't do it, and there's all this other stuff going on, and I saw pigs flying yesterday. Those kind of folks. You enjoy the conversation and just take it for what it's worth. Let's wait and see what the results of the trial are, what the evidence is.
By the way, I'm going to take us way off the tracks. Was not planning to do this. This is going to derail us probably for the next hour and a half, and everyone's going to yell at me, but it's going to be too much fun not to. Real quick before I get there, though, the lover of I am totally loving this podcast / channel. It's awesome. I'm very new to these types of discussions. I love it. Awesome and very interesting. Glad that you are here. Happy you're joining us.
STS, and let me make one correction before you go off the rails, Joel.
Yes, sir.
From last week,
yes,
I brought up Andrea Yates in our discussion about a lot of different things, which, and I said then in the discussion was that I thought she had been sentenced to the death penalty in the first trial, and I was incorrect about that. She was actually found guilty of capital murder and was given life with no parole. Now, the second one found innocent or not guilty by a reason of insanity, and she is currently residing, I believe, in a facility around the Kerrville area in Texas. So, just wanted to make that correction.
Fil Waters, always willing to correct himself. Love that. Patricia Ann Ryan, STS Nation, is there a link to Miss Chapin's book? I will get the chief technical officer to put one in the summary of this show, and we should all support her. So Fil Waters, there was a whistleblower this week. This is not on my notes. This is nowhere. Something someone said triggered it. Claims high up in the armed forces, and claims that the U.S. government has pieces of alien ships and even some alien bodies. If you were investigating this, what do you think? Do you think that he is telling the truth? Have we been visited? And by the way, I'm trying to do an entire show on this Sunday night. One of my guys, Art Bell, Coast to Coast AM, the godfather of this. He's not alive, so he can't join us, but doing it to honor him. Fil Waters, are there aliens? Is there alien life? And have they visited?
Well, I don't know. I would say we would have to be, and we are, I talk about man in general, we would have to be terribly arrogant, which man is, to not think that there are other life forms in this huge universe. So now, do I personally think? I will tell you, look, and I'm not a UFO guy, but I will tell you that when I was a kid in Oklahoma, I saw what I believed to be a UFO. And since we have been here in Hawaii, I can walk outside at night and it is amazing to look up into that sky. And I will tell you, last year, I was out. In fact, our ritual is that I take Nugget out about 10:30 to do her business. And so I go out there and I just take in the enormity of God's creation. So I look up and I saw what I thought was an aircraft, but the lights on it were doing some weird things, and it was moving very slowly, and then it would stop, and then it would move back, and then it would move up, and then in an instant, it was gone.
And what did you say to yourself in that very moment, Fil Waters?
Well, I came upstairs and I told my wife, I said, I think I just saw a UFO. So, and I'm not one given to that, but I'm telling you that I think that I have had those two encounters. Now, this other stuff here, the area, what is it, Area 51 and all this stuff.
Yeah.
We've been hearing for years and years. There have been shows ad nauseum about whistleblowers that have come forward and said this and that. Now, I don't know if this is the first time that a military whistleblower has come up and said this and that and this, that. But the accusations here are much the same as they've always been. And unless they've got, of course, who knows, right? What the government's got. I mean, for crying out loud. And it's compelling. It's always a compelling discussion.
Yeah.
And,
well, look, I don't know if you saw this, but Scott Duffey, there is video, and you can Google this. This is a local Las Vegas news station. I want to say CBS. And there is body cam footage of this. A couple calls the police. This is just the other day. It actually may have happened. They just released it. So I think it happened a little while ago. Long story short, a very credible sounding guy and his wife, they call the police and they say some sort of aircraft has just landed or crashed in our backyard. And there are two very large figures. And he says these are not human figures. And you can hear the 911 call. Says they're about 10 feet with strange eyes, and they take off. Now, when the police arrive, you need to Google this to see it for yourselves. When the police arrive, you catch this beam of green light on the officer's body cam footage, and the responding officer's partner had told the partner there that he too thought he saw something land or crash in a property, and they went to investigate. And the police officer said something to the effect of, by the way, if this ever happens again, please don't call us because I think it might be real. And I'm terrified to investigate this. But Scott Duffey, what do you make of that? Because this is not, the guy in the call also suggests that he is 100% sincere. He says, this is not a prank. I'm not scared, but I'm very concerned about what's going on. These are not human figures. What say you, Scott Duffey, from your bunker where you're hiding with your MREs?
So I do have in my office the poster from the X-Files.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a great poster. And I have often, when, kind of as a little bit of a prank, when I would go and identify myself as an FBI agent to one person or another, I would definitely say Fox Mulder. So I am a big fan, let's say, and always open. But I have seen some. I haven't seen that one, but I have seen some shows with what I believe to be legitimate videos, not doctored in any way, and it leaves me wondering, what is that? So I will say, I think statute of limitations are up. That I've tried to do my own little digging when I was on the inside of the government to try to see what am I not.
Scott could have been the
what am I missing? But it's I don't know. I don't have. I can't say I believe, but I am totally open, and I think that comes from being many years as an investigator. Always be open to the to something that's going to surprise you, and that's so. Yeah, I'm open to the idea, and the poster sits proudly on my wall for a reason.
This is it's an infinite universe, they say. How could we be the only species in this world, galaxy, universe, whatever you want to say?
Well, just to contrast Scott and his poster of the X-Files on his wall, I have a framed poster for the Steven Seagal movie Out for Justice.
Ooh, that's cool.
And it is a really cool poster. He's standing there in a shotgun with a duster on. So yeah, it's pretty cool. Anyway, cool.
That guy's still going, kind of. Julie Frew.
He's kind of gone off. He's gone on way off. I think he's now
he might
working for Putin or some off the wall crazy thing. But
he could be an alien for all we know. He might not be human. You know,
he's starting to look like an alien. I can tell you that.
Julie Frew. Is it a good approach to attack the prosecutors in this case? Back to Kohberger here, as Miss Gray did today, and said that I didn't see this, by the way, and said the Gonzalez family have not been given information. I guess they're talking about Steve Gonzalez's attorney. Is that what I'm seeing here? That is in there, as well as this, which is a little off topic, Phil, but for you, from Laura Waldy, how did you both deal, and Scott too, with the stress of your jobs? Was counseling available? Do you engage in, this is more than one question, in sports or hobbies? And how does one deal with so much death on a daily basis? Fil Waters, I know what your answer is going to be, but have at it.
Well, to answer all the questions, the first answer is easy. I'm grounded in my faith. As far as engaging in other hobbies, I ride motorcycles, went out to the range, shot, doing a lot of, I was an instructor. And so I had a lot of different out. Of course, then coming to Hawaii, which is a whole different vibe. And so I've been, and I like to read. I'm a pretty voracious reader, and I like to read a lot of different things. I like to read a lot of James Patterson stuff, and I like to read books on history. And so I try to stay up on top of that. And so, yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of different outlets that I have found that were, and I worked out a lot when I was on the job and doing all that, to use a term that I've been accused of, using all that toxic masculinity stuff.
Speaking of toxic masculinity, Phil, let's just hypothetically,
which I am proud to be. I am proud to exude that, if that's what people think. So
Phil, there's no one more masculine than you. That is for damn sure. Let's assume you're in a Target parking lot and there's a perpetrator committing a heinous act. Mm-hmm. How far or how close would you have to be with your shooting abilities to take this perpetrator out? How accurate are you from what distance, if I may lean into your toxic masculinity?
Well, with a handgun, I wouldn't want to make that shot, but at 50 yards, I could probably hit him.
Scott Duffey?
I would prefer to move in closer to the target. It would, of course, it depend on where the other person is, right? Where is the victim in this thing? And of course, when we train for these types of things, it may require to walk and shoot. It may require to walk right up to the perpetrator and screw that 45 in his ear and take him out. So, yeah.
Scott, I don't mean to compare lengths here, but in this discussion, I must. Would you be capable of taking someone out from 50 yards with a handgun? What an interesting conversation. All of a sudden, we have really gone off the rails. But Scott Duffey, how accurate are you with your firearm?
Yeah, so we train 5 times a year. And we went from the 5-yard line to the 25-yard line. We would do a 50 for the fun of it, not for qualifications. 25 was even tough for me. 15 and in wouldn't miss the paper, but the and I know there are plenty of studies, and I would hear these studies. I don't even know what some of the numbers are of what most shootings that take place. How they are close range, but 15 and less, I feel comfortable. I can hit the paper pretty good at 25, but and we would try to do things that would add to our stress level, because it's one thing to be on the range, taking your time and breathing. You have somewhat of a time limit, but but then to run, to jog, to do push-ups or whatever else, and to really get your mind racing and your heart racing, and then go down range. So it would, just that little bit of a difference. So I'll say comfortable, very comfortable at 15. So Phil's got me at 50.
Well, Scott's right. I mean, most police shootings are going to take place within 5 to 7 yards. So when we fired on the range, we shot from 3 yards, and then to I think we went out 15. I think we may have gone 25 yards. I'm trying to think what the long range was, but yeah, we and I was a firearms instructor and shot distinguished expert and that kind of thing. So I can't do that now, but I would feel comfortable being able to take that shot if I had to.
Phil, who has a better shot, you or your son Shane, who is a decorated Marine?
Who has better what?
Better shot, a better shot.
Well, I am, of course, but he did qualify. When I was in the Marine Corps, I qualified expert. I think 5 times, 6 or 7 times with my rifle, with my M16 and M14, and qualified 3 times only because I qualified 3 times with my 45, and he also measured up to that. He was expert every time he qualified when he was in the Marines. So he's a good shot.
Gentil says, love how Scott and Phil matched today. I did not get the blue shirt memo. Back to Kohberger, and then we'll move on. It's a fun Friday here. Fil Waters, I'm curious to get your take on this. So the latest evildoer news is he was pictured sitting in the front row of a 2018 lecture involving Margaret Atwood. She is better known for writing the best-selling novel, The Handmaid's Tale. It is a dystopian story about a government-sponsored subjugation of women. It was adopted for Hulu in 2017. There was a profiler named John Kelly, well-known, who was interviewed about this and says he didn't go there to see the author. He went there to see the audience. He believes this guy's an incel. He does not like women. And he was there because he was always, quote unquote, looking. How do you respond?
And what's the simple question in all that?
Is he an incel? Was he there to?
No, I know that's a word that's been bandied about a lot. In fact, our old friend Jonathan used to talk about it all the time. And I guess it's just one of those aspects that, I mean, for me, it might be interesting, but it's not something I ponder, nor do I care much about it. Other than the fact that it gives you a little background on him. And, and I've talked about psychological autopsy. So that would be all a component of the bigger picture. But whether he is or he isn't, I mean, that's another one of these contrived terms that somebody's popped up with. And now it's the flavor of the month, so.
And by the way, it stands for involuntary celibate is what I think it stands for. Scott Duffey, this profiler went on to say these types of guys would be looking, stalking, peeping at women through that hill. He's talking about the one near the home where this happened. And then goes on to say, I just want to hear this guy's explanation on how his DNA ended up on a K-bar knife sheath. He doesn't have a shot in the world unless he has some kind of explanation for that. What about the fact he showed up at this talk basically filled with women? Do you think he was there to sort of survey the room, so to speak?
Yeah, I think I'm going to jump on with Phil here. It's right. I've never pretended to be a profiler, and people just sometimes automatically think, "Oh, you're an FBI agent. You're a profiler." And I would leave that to whoever the profilers were, and they're good at what they do, I guess, to a point. And I've used them, but I agree with the studies and the research and have used it with regards to progression, right? I mean, typically somebody who has killed has not just, unless there are certain exceptions. But if we're talking about someone like this, it is hard to believe it is the first, right? And perhaps the first homicide, but what led up to? And so are there these moments where Bryan is peeking into this or that and peering into one thing or another and progressing in such a way? He was a PhD student in criminology, so he had an interest. Not sure if that interest was a teacher, researcher. Ultimately, Fil and I and many, if not all, law enforcement, you develop a lot through what you do on a daily basis, interviewing and interrogating and listening. So, it's very possible, but I wouldn't, I'm not going to call him an incel. I'm not going to call him anything else. A profiler may go ahead and I think typically too, a true profiler would wait. And just like others, the convicted serial killers who have survived, right, who are here to talk, do provide research. And so these profilers go in and they learn from their, talking to these type of individuals. And so I think there will be something that will be gained years down the road from this guy. And we'll see if they're all right. But yeah, it's tough to kind of go into those type of things. I can't go down that road yet.
Just a hair more on the evildoer. We'll move on. Roel Thomas has a great idea. Let's attend the Alien Fest at Roswell and get the answers. We could have a STS field trip there. But Fil Waters, to you, the evildoer, Mr. Kohberger, he applied for a security job at one point. Fox News Digital broke the story. They found the actual application, and he wrote on that application, "I boxed after school every day at the Jesse Harris boxing gym on 209 next to Big Cheese Pizza when it was still open." He's very detailed here. "I am a boxer. I'm still a runner, and I believe that dedication and perseverance are the most important skills learned from my activities. I lost 130 pounds at age 15 going into age 16 whilst attending school at such and such high school. And I believe that this is proof that I have the required dedication to be successful." As a man who thinks highly of himself, do you read anything into this other than a high school kid filling out an application, job application for, I think, what was a security position? Is there anything to read into that now that you know what he's accused of?
Well, no, I mean, I don't think so. I mean, he's a guy trying to find a job, and every one of us that fills out an application wants to present the best image of ourselves to the potential employer. So I don't see that as being anything terribly insightful. I mean, I think what he's trying to express to this potential employer is that he's a disciplined person. And so whether that, I mean, I guess when this whole thing is done, there'll be people that will go back and they'll get paid a lot of money to go back and analyze and nitpick every little thing this guy did. And just this particular reading of this application in the context of when that application was submitted, I would just say is that I don't see it being any different than if you or I or Scott had been filling out an application for a job. So I don't know. We may be able to connect it in some way later on, but I mean, just in isolation by itself, I don't find it a particularly revealing attribute of this guy.
Lorna McKenzie says, "Love it, Scott. The X-Files, LOL," followed by Scott wasn't ready for the alien talk. He is so chill. He would probably offer them a beer. All right, enough with the By the way, Suzanne says, I agree with Scott, always be open. And Tolly says, I think we have a gag order on the aliens. Now, this next story, Phil brought to my attention. Scott Peterson, not the one as in Lacey, and not the one who was a rogue cop from Illinois. I think had the same name. Neither of them, but this guy was a on-duty police officer during the attack at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High. He's the first U.S. police officer ever charged with failing to respond to a school shooting, although those guys in Uvalde might be facing this too one day. He's a 60-year-old. He could receive up to 97 years in prison. Prosecutors say that Mr. Peterson, who was armed with a handgun but was not wearing a bullet-resistant vest, failed to follow his active shooter training to minimize casualties during this 6-minute attack. Phil, since you reminded me of this, your overall take on this case?
I find it atrocious that this man has been charged with anything. And I'll be the first one. I've worked officer-involved shootings. I've worked officer-involved use of force cases. I've worked many cases that involve police officers. And if they've done something wrong or made a bad decision or a misjudgment, I'm the first one to stand up and say that needs to be corrected, and that was a violation of something, whether it was law or administrative stuff. But this case, we see these things, and this has been the atmosphere for the last 3 years or so, that police officers are getting charged for doing their jobs. This is the first case that I have ever seen in my career or lifetime, as you just alluded to, Joel, where they are charging an officer for not doing something. And there's that Parkland shooting, horrific. I think 17 people dead, 17 people wounded. I want to say 14 of those people, 15 of those people were children, were kids, and horrific. But I've been around ranges, I've hunted, I've been around firearms being shot my whole life. And I can tell you, when that deputy is standing, that's a 45-acre complex, I think, 48 acres. That's a 3-story building. It is huge. And when he hears those gunshots, I will tell you from my own experience, he doesn't have a clue where those shots are coming from. And to think that even if he did, the thought that he would have been able to respond, get to the 3rd floor, and somehow take this guy out like what they see on television is just ridiculous. So in the real world, this is not what happens. And you can watch the videos of what he is doing. And then if you'll look at the radio traffic that he's having, he's trying to find out where these shots are coming from. And I can tell you, if he's standing there and those shots are coming from the 3rd floor, echoing through that building, and he says that it sounded like they were coming from the outside. And there are apparently a dozen or more witnesses that will say the same thing. So, and when these things happen, everybody is looking for somebody to pay a price. And they all get distracted with who caused this problem, who did this horrific event. And I'll not say his name either. So that evildoer has now been convicted, and he managed to slide on the death penalty, which is beyond me. But he's the one responsible for what happened up there. And when people try to put something like that on the back of a police officer that weren't there when this was happening in real time, I find them to be disgusting. And these prosecutors, they charged him a year later. And then, because he retired right after this happened. This man had been a school resource officer in that school for 25 years. He knew that sheriff, who was an absolute jerk, who dumped him under the bus 2 days after that happened, and who was later removed from his office. And he knew the sheriff personally. The sheriff used to coach football at that school. His boys went to school there. And so there's a lot of dynamics. There's a lot of background stuff going on here, as there always is with these kind of stories. And so when it happens, he responds, and he's taking action based on what he knows. And these people that sit here now, Monday morning quarterbacks, looking back and saying, this is what he should have been doing, it just blows my mind every time I hear that discussion about every type of incident involving a police officer. I mean, it just amazes me. So these prosecutors, they've charged him, I think, with 3 counts of child abuse and 10 counts of some sort of child neglect or something. I mean, it is unbelievable to me. I mean, you think you're in a. I'm sure he knows. I tell you, my concern for him is that he eats his gun at some point. I mean, people just don't get it, and I just find it disgusting that these prosecutors are going after this deputy as though anything he could have done at that moment in time, given what he knew, would have changed the circumstances. And so so that's my take on it. I probably went on way too long, and I'll get comments about that, and that's fine. But
Phil,
when I see something wrong, I'm very passionate about it, and so this is wrong what they're doing to this man. And I just hope that and pray that jury, when they see all of the evidence, when they see everything laid out in front of them, that they acquit him in about 30 minutes. So, I find that particularly. You mentioned Uvalde. I'm going to tell you something. I know some of the folks down there, and when these things happen, I'm going to tell you, administrators, the upper echelon of law enforcement goes into damage control mode on steroids. And there are some things that happened in that Uvalde thing that throwing these officers under the bus because they didn't do this or they didn't do that when they weren't there when this happened. I just think, I'm sorry. I mean, as tragic as these events are, we just add to the tragedy by vilifying the people that were there trying to address the situation at the time, given on what they knew at the time. So I'll get off my soapbox. Sorry about that.
Well, no, that's a good point. It's easier in hindsight, of course, to judge someone than it is in the moment. But I know Mark Eiglarsh is, who is Scott Peterson's defense attorney. He's local here in South Florida. By the way, it's 22 witnesses the defense has that will say that will testify that they too did not know which direction the shots were coming from. By the way, this happened. I was reminded not long after that Las Vegas sniper shooting, and no one knew where those shots were coming from. So right. Mark Eiglarsh is using that as well as part of the defense. And yeah, it's obviously a very difficult predicament for this guy to be in. Scott Duffey, do you agree with Phil here? Mark Eiglarsh said, and I'll let you respond to this, what we have here is a man with a decorated history of serving the community for 32 years, and literally 4 minutes and 15 seconds, they're now claiming he has become a criminal. In your eyes, should he be prosecuted for this, or are you on the same side of the fence as Phil on this one?
I am, and if I can, in a few extra points, I absolutely, when you're in the face of something extremely horrific happening, shots fired, and you're now running towards it, there may absolutely be downsides, that and I remember the reports early on about him running, and then he wasn't running away. um and so it was, I just felt there was an immediate attack on not just a single police officer's actions, but it seemed to be joining in with pointing fingers before any video, anything whatsoever was taking place, because the officer was not inside, um, targeting the shooter, right? And so everybody Monday morning quarterback and whatnot, I totally believe that a police officer is held to a higher standard, and for very good reason, because of the training we go through, because of um and there's a lot that goes through an academy, and then of course recertification each year to keep building up and building up, and then of course all the alert and active shooter training that has taken place as a result of the inaction of Columbine. You could go back and say the exact same thing with Columbine. Um, they and so of course it's a different type of training, and um, and a very necessary type of training, but to criminalize it is a very difficult place to be in, to where you, as opposed to whatever you're going to do, and of course he retired immediately, but if you're going to either try to go after um stripes or whatnot, or try to demean his years of service, then so be it. Let it up for the politicians and of course the community there involved. But we're 6 years away now. They've gone back and forth, and I always have a difficult time when you try to um, criminalize behavior, uh, as opposed to some other. He knows what he did, um, and and just I can only imagine the sorrow that he feels for not being able to save the day, right? I mean, there are those who save the day, and then there are those that don't. And I think every police officer takes that takes that home with them. So I totally agree. We can't criminalize the behavior, especially when there are so many conflicting reports of what he knew, what he didn't know, what he did, what he didn't do. So, yes, there are after action reports, and there's definitely things to be learned, right? As a result of Columbine, we've moved forward with a different type of training, where, because not everybody is a SWAT officer, not every officer works with another officer from another town. But when you're going in to a building where there's an active shooter, you want to make sure that person next to you, shoulder to shoulder, is there with you, and you're going to be able to get the job done, never having worked with that person before, unlike SWAT teams, which do a fantastic job day in and day out through their training. So I'm with Phil with regards to we should be very, very careful to Monday morning quarterback police officers who did not save the day, and then all of a sudden to point the finger, demonize, criminalize, and charge. It's a very dangerous path we're going down. If as opposed to, hey, there needs to be some retraining, there needs to be some of this, there needs to be some of that, and let's and then make a decision if he didn't retire, whether or not he would be able to go forward, or to hold some sort of hearing with regards to his job on the line, as opposed to now making his actions criminal. So yeah, it's a very, very difficult time, and I'm starting to see it more so. And when I talk to young recruits, it is disturbing, because there are very, very, very good people out there who cannot figure it all out, and you resort to your training, and sometimes that training is not going to kick into something that is so unique, to where you're like, this is not happening the way I played it in my mind in a training scenario. And so I got to rethink a different way, or retool it or something. And then to have the possibility that you're going to be charged working into, or a media outlet saying, bad officer. Yeah, I have to stand with law enforcement, because there's a lot that goes through that officer's mind, and it shouldn't be Monday morning quarterbacked and then charged, because that officer did not wake up that day and say, this is a day I'm going to really do something bad. And so I think we really ought to rethink the way we move forward in prosecuting police in that type of case.
He does face 11 charges, 7 of felony child neglect, 3 of culpable negligence, 1 of perjury. I believe there were 140 shots fired from Nicholas Cruz. 75 of them were there after Scott Peterson arrived. But this is going to fire Fil up, I think. But a lot of people here. So the officers in Uvalde shooting shouldn't be prosecuted for not doing anything. Now there, I think it was, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, I believe it was well over an hour where they did not enter the building. Lorna says the Uvalde officers should definitely be prosecuted. Brianna says, so Fil, what's a school resource officer's duty? Wanda says they should be charged. Fil Waters, your response as a veteran police officer.
Well, I'm going to say, all I'm going to say is no. I mean, to get into the discussion any further, and I've already stated my case. I mean, to get into it any further, it's just going to be, yada, yada, yada. And I'm not going to engage in that conversation. I'm just going to tell you that people need to understand and know all of the facts before they start running their heads about prosecuting police. And in this case, again, in the Peterson case, we're talking about prosecuting for something he didn't do, which is just, you can't prove a negative. I mean, for crying out loud. And then they retroactively fire him a year later after he'd retired. I'm telling you, the whole thing stinks. I'm sorry. It just does.
Let's switch gears here for a second. Scott, do you want to weigh in on the Uvalde thing? Because I think it was over an hour. I mean, is your take the same as Fil in that one, or do you think that needs to be investigated further?
I would say Uvalde is different, but I don't know enough. I've seen the videos that are out there, and so with regards to Uvalde, it's the investigation is taking place, right? And I'm all for as much time as it is needed to figure out if there is criminal behavior. We have to remember, criminal behavior, it's tragic no matter what. There may be firings, that resignations, retirements, etc. But we really have to step back, allow everything to come out, allow the prosecution, allow the investigators to do their job. And there will be some hard a hard look at this, but Uvalde is different. I know there are a lot of, and even in my circles, we look back from up north and say, wow, that's in this day and age. How can that happen? But from what I have been learned early on was it went from an active shooter to a negotiations. And then of course everything changes. And then and that information was incorrect. So I would say each and every case needs to be dealt with differently. I'm not saying that no police officer should ever not be prosecuted for not doing their job. What I'm saying is be very slow to move down that direction to criminalize the behavior. And so it's because a police officer is it may be that a police officer should not be in that position day two, but that we, with regards to being in an absolute chaotic scene, just to hold off and allow everything to go through an investigation, all cameras to be seen, everybody to be interviewed, and then to make a decision based upon the facts. I mean, we are talking about criminal behavior. It's one thing to fire an officer. It's one thing to say retire. This is no longer a job for you. It's a totally different thing to say to charge somebody criminally for an inaction, and so I agree with Phil. There really has to be a lot that goes forward and to determine a criminal act has taken place. Nevertheless, something is extremely tragic and sad. We can all look back at Uvalde because it was all there and it was over an hour and make decisions back and forth. And to say I wouldn't do that or I would have done something differently. But to criminalize, really, you really have to. That takes a lot, and I think it should not happen haphazardly or simply because something looked bad on camera.
And I remember when that first happened that the police were getting destroyed, especially on Twitter. When it first happened, I'm talking like the first few hours after it happened. And I remember fighting with people on Twitter because I am very pro law enforcement and said, what would you do? If gunfire breaks out, I'm running behind Scott or Phil. Now, in retrospect, however long ago it was, over a year now, or more, I don't know. I mean, like Scott says, got to let the investigation now play out and see what's going on.
Let me say something about the Uvalde thing.
Yeah.
Look, let me put it in this. Let me use this illustration. And Scott is dead on when you start talking about criminal stuff, regardless of what your opinion is. One of the key components of a criminal charge is what? And the first one is intent. So to think that we're going to charge a bunch of police officers because, as Scott has already alluded to, that we're going to charge a bunch of police officers criminally because they got up that morning and intended to go out and not do something that would cause the deaths of children in a school. That is so egregious to even put that out there. That is totally disgusting to me. So let me put it in this context. And there were bad decisions made. And if people want to hold them accountable through a civil process where they think they're going to get some sort of more peace of mind by bringing them into the civil process, or if now there is a component of the criminal law, which you can charge somebody with criminal negligent homicide in Texas. That's a possibility, but you better look at the elements of every one of these cases and how they happen. But let me put that Uvalde thing in particular with this illustration. You're a platoon commander on a battlefield, and you make a tactical decision that costs most of the lives of your platoon. You made a tactical decision based on what you knew, and it cost you the lives of your entire platoon. Now, is the right thing to do to bring that who made a tactical decision on the battlefield in the midst of the battle, we're supposed to court-martial that platoon commander under those circumstances when what he did was make a bad tactical decision based on what he knew at the time? Well, of course not. That's absolutely asinine. But do you have a platoon commander that goes in and willfully makes a decision knowing what the possibilities of the outcome might be, and then you have the same results? Does that person get court-martialed? You bet he does. So people need to understand, especially those that have never been in the belly of the beast, need to understand that when that stuff is going on, it is fluid. It is happening. It is happening in milliseconds. It is happening in real time. And people, based on their experience and their character, are making decisions at that moment in time based on what they know and how they know to respond to it. So I am not going to be one of those that is going to, well, and I'll contrast that as well. This young man that was murdered up in Tennessee, I think it was in Memphis, with this his name is Tavion. I can't remember his name, but where the 5 or 6 Memphis police officers beat him to death is what it boiled down to. Mm-hmm. What they did was wrong. What they did was criminal. And they are being prosecuted for it, as they should be. So I would contrast, and I'm going to use police action. I'm going to compare apples to apples here. That is the most graphic example of police officers doing the wrong thing, doing a criminal thing to a person that never deserved it. We cannot compare that to what happened at Uvalde and what happened at Parkland. It is not the same thing. You got to take these things as they are. Every case is different. So I would just tell, and I know this is going to get all the haters, their panties are in a wad. I mean, they are doubling up on them right now. But I'm just telling you that you better be able to look at these things with a more objective attitude. And you know what? I've said it before, Joel. I've had a lot of jobs in my life, scooping ice cream to being a platoon commander in the Marine Corps. But I tell you what, I've not had a job like this one where there were more people that knew how to do my job better than me, having never done it. So, sorry I got back on the soapbox again, but this kind of stuff I'm very passionate about. It's just amazes me. I'm sorry.
That was a great last line. I could see that in a Fil Waters biopic coming to a movie theater near you. There's another story I have to get to, but Amanda's asking. So we did Matthew Nilo, the accused Boston serial rapist, as an attorney. By the way, another Boston attorney was just acquitted on charges of rape today. A guy named Gary Zarola, who was once one of People magazine's top 50 bachelors in America. He was accused of raping a 23-year-old woman back in 2016 when he was 45. Prosecutors said that he raped this woman at a friend's apartment. According to the defense, she kept changing her story. And the defense says that his status as a prominent attorney is the reason he was acquitted today. But this came up also with Matthew Nilo. And Wendy Murphy, who is a visiting scholar at Harvard and a law professor, according to Amanda, she was on our show and talked about how a lot of times rape is committed by elitists, people who are, highly educated, who think that they're entitlement, basically. So, Joel, can we please get Phil's option on the absolute wrong statement that Wendy Murphy made on your show the other day? I am a retired sergeant. Thank you, from the NYPD, for your service, and have worked many rape cases in my career. She stated that rape victims have no choice and can be forced to testify. She should stay in her lane as an attorney and let law enforcement deal with victims, period. Fil Waters, your response, and then one final story.
Oh, wow. So we want to uncork this cracking again, huh?
Yeah, somehow this got into a heavy Friday. I don't know how this happened.
Oh my gosh, we start talking about aliens, and now we're.
Well, let me rephrase it. I mean, I guess I get what she's saying.
Yeah. I want to understand the question.
What I think what came up with Wendy Murphy is she said, "Look, so many of these rapes are committed by men who feel entitled." And then I guess she went on to say that they would be forced to testify. That I don't know about. I guess if there's
the victim,
the victims, yeah. Can you force a victim to testify? I guess if you're subpoenaed, right? I don't know.
Well, let me answer this way. The basic component of a trial is that you have to have a defendant and you have to have a complainant that the state represents in the prosecution. If you do not have a complainant that wants to move forward in the prosecution of the case, whatever it is, then you do not have a defendant. So therefore, you do not have a trial. You don't process this thing any further. The system is not designed to just arbitrarily charge somebody with something and then prosecute them if you don't have a complaining witness. Now, the only difference in this is in homicide cases, because your complaining witness is dead, so you cannot obviously. So that complaining witness is going to exist forever and ever. Amen. And that's why you go and you find the person who did that thing, and you put them on trial, even though you don't have a complaining witness that can testify. So that's going to be my general answer for any charge. And forcing, if you're the complaining witness in this case, I don't know a prosecutor anywhere in the country that is going to try to force someone to testify where they've been sexually assaulted. Now, I can tell you that in at least in Texas, in cases of family violence, even if the spouse that has been assaulted does not want to prosecute the other spouse, the state can still prosecute the defendant, the suspect. So in that regard, the state can testify, and, to use the word that's being used here, can try to force the complaining witness, i.e. the wife or the husband, to testify in that proceeding. In fact, if we had a case with Warren Moon, who was the quarterback of the Houston Oilers, got in a family violence episode. His wife did not want to pursue it, and they tried him anyway. Now, I don't remember if she testified or not. She may have, but and I think he was acquitted. But and I may be wrong about that. I may have to check that. But so that's an example, and I will tell you, in my mind, that's wrong. That is wrong for the state to do that, because our system is based on you have a complaining witness and you have a defendant. And if you don't have this component, then you don't have this one. So those kind of prosecutions, in my view, are politically motivated. And that's why that kind of law was passed in Texas, was to satisfy a political agenda about family violence. And that is a horrific issue. I'm not minimizing that at all. I'm just saying that the state is trying to enhance, they're trying to get into people's business. This stuff about, police departments getting sued because somebody in a family violence incident ends up getting murdered because the police didn't protect them. Well, there aren't enough police officers on the face of the planet to do that in the first place. We have temporary restraining orders. We have protective orders. We have all these pieces of paper that have been legislated into being that are designed to protect those victims. And I'm going to tell you right now, the reality is there's not a piece of paper on the face of the planet that's going to protect a person from harming another person if they are wanting to do it. And so to throw these stones at whatever entity you're going to throw them at because somehow they could have magically prevented this from happening is just foolhardy. It's a lie. It's a lie. So I don't know if that answers this question here, but to me, it's the same answer no matter what the crime is.
One more story, and then we're going to wrap it up. Perpetua says, we will never know the courage it takes for these officers to put their lives on the line every day to do a job in what has become an extremely dangerous world. Mad respect for the profession. Followed here by misdemeanor. Phil, you will never convince these second guessers with logic. She's telling you, don't even try. Janine K says, my daughter is a police officer. Thank you for her service, and I worry about her every second of every day. Her department is down 2 full-time officers. Stop and think about that for a minute. I live in a very quiet neighborhood, and I see these officers on Friday nights or Saturdays pulling over. It runs through. You have to go through my area to get to busy areas, so there's a lot of through traffic. And every time they pull someone over, I get nervous. You just don't know what is going to happen. You heard Phil talking about pulling people over, not to give tickets, but to see what was going on. Maha says, listen, that cop did the right thing. What I heard was he was getting multiple messages on his walkie-talkie. On to the last story here, Scott Duffey, and this is a doozy.
Guy, I know I'm going to get this too for interrupting, but let me say something here. The lady there that I think it was a lady, right, that talked about her daughter being a
Police
cop
officer. Yes.
So let me tell you the latest thing that's got me fired up.
Her name is Janine K.
Okay, well, Janine, your daughter. Thank you for her service. That's awesome. She's not a deputy any longer. She had to retire medically because of the PTSD about this event. California, I want to say San Bernardino Sheriff's Office. I cannot remember the deputy's name, saved my life. I want to say it's Margaret. Anyway, she goes to a call. She's the closest one to a call. A mother calls dispatch and says, I need somebody here to get my son out of here. And she responds to the call. The woman is still on the phone with dispatch when she arrives. When she arrives, she sees the son coming out of the house. The mother is behind him holding a knife. I need him to get out of here. So she engages with the suspect. She's trying to get him under control, which means she needs to get him secured in handcuffs, pat him down, and see what we have here. But her first responsibility is to secure that scene. She does that. She attempts to do that. And his response to it is he beats the crap out of her, steals her gun, and starts shooting at her. And the only reason she's not dead today is because he pointed that pistol at her face and it jammed. It had a malfunction. So then the officers respond and they put him in. Once the posse shows up, once the reinforcements show up, he drops the weapon, puts his hands up, and they get him into custody. Now, I think the physical injuries, a black eye, and I don't remember what the other one was, but this guy pummeled her and then shot at her, intended to kill her. So he was filed on for attempted murder and some other, disarming a police officer, other charges. A jury just acquitted him, just found him not guilty. And the biggest the biggest unbelief I have about this is every part of this is on video. You see it happen to this deputy.
How did he get acquitted?
Because the jury are a bunch of idiots. So the defense attorney walked in there, and his argument was that the officer's initial contact with this guy was illegal, that she should not have started patting him down. She should not have done this. She should not have done that, which is she did. What her approach was textbook. This is what every law enforcement officer is trained to do at a scene like this. Textbook. And his argument was that since she did the wrong thing at the beginning, he could have pummeled her 100 times. He could have punched her 100 times, and he wouldn't have been wrong. He wouldn't have been guilty. It was the most amazing defense I've ever heard, and only a California jury would buy into that kind of nonsense. Yeah, so this is the atmosphere that has been established now over the last 3 years about law enforcement. And this is a dangerous, dangerous road to go down. So those people that are in support of what happened out there with this not guilty verdict for this guy that was no doubt trying to murder a police officer, and she's in full uniform, there's no doubt who she was. The next time you get in trouble and you get in a situation like that, you need to call a crackhead. Don't call the police.
Wow. Did not even hear about this story.
Oh, it's unbelievable.
If it was Texas or Florida, I think it would be a different outcome. Sensory combustion, I knew we had a connection, Phil. My first job, Baskin Robbins in Montecito, California. And my first job was, well, not my first, but one of my jobs was Carvel ice cream. I worked for my friend Mike. Made it miserable for me. Unbelievable. Anyway, scooping ice cream on a Friday night, that was no fun, but teaches you the ways of the world, gives you some discipline, and I don't know. Phil got the lesson better than me because he's in Hawaii and well, I'm in Miami. It's not bad, but I don't know. Who knows? Final story for Scott Duffey. Young Yu Young. If you haven't heard of her, Scott, this story is incredible to me. She is a fanatical true crime fan in South Korea. She allegedly killed and dismembered a woman out of curiosity, quote, curiosity about murder. This is how it all went down. She was obsessed with TV shows and books about crime, and she said to herself, I'm going to murder someone for real. She conducted research on her computer about how to do it and how to conceal a body. She then went on an app used to get tutors, and she pretended she was the mother of a child, even though she's 23 and has no kids, and that her child wanted to learn English. So this woman agreed to meet her. She goes to the home. The woman answers the door. She goes in. This woman dresses as a school child to kind of conceal herself. She's 4'9" and 90 pounds, they say. She enters the home and stabs this woman to death, butchers her, and dismembers her. She tried to commit the perfect crime. She brings trash bags and bleach. She returned to the home to try to clean it up. A cabbie of all people was suspicious of this woman, called the authorities. They found blood everywhere in her bag. And she then told reporters she was really sorry for the victim's family. They asked her why she committed this crime, and she said, I think I was out of my mind. I guess the big question here, Scott Duffey, do people need to be careful when being fans of true crime, not to take it too seriously and become the story? As a reporter, you always say, don't be the story. But what do you make of this? This is total insanity. Scott's like, let me go and have my beer. It's Friday. I don't want to answer this.
It's true crime. So what I guess, yes, it's another murder. Another crazy murder. And
at least it's not the bozo
Sorry about that. I
At least
thought I had.
Nuggets getting a call.
Yeah, it's
I
not the
thought I
bully.
had. I thought I had silenced all of that, but I guess I
Yeah.
didn't. Sorry.
It's all good, Phil. It's all good. We're used to strange noises coming from your way, Phil. But Scott, what's the deal with this woman? 23 years old,
Yeah.
a loner, never hung out with anyone. What's the deal here?
It sounds familiar. It sounds somebody like we were talking about earlier in the program. So it's there, from the beginning of time till the end of time, that there will always be a new murder story, and they'll probably one will trump the other. And there are, but I don't like the premise that she was a true crime, fan, and then turned criminal. It's she was a criminal in the making. She made the decision then to maybe better herself, to understand the criminal mind, because she had a criminal mind. And but as Phil and I have touched upon in the past, it's very tough to commit the perfect crime. And in her head, she committed the perfect crime, but she never fantasized about the cleanup. And so thereby that was her downfall. And my guess is she was taking a cabbie to and from the crime scene to from her house, with probably making a stop at whatever mart with all sorts of bags and so forth. But it's she's
nutty.
committed a horrible crime. Yeah. Yep. She obviously had quite a few issues leading up to her true crime.
Phil Waters, Scott made a great point. She fantasized about the crime except for the cleanup part. What should happen to young, 23 years old, that dismembered a woman in South Korea? She's now apologized to the family. I don't know what the criminal system is like in South Korea. I have a feeling she will not spend the rest of her life in jail. But how do you're not a psychologist, Phil, but how do you diagnose her?
No, I didn't play one on television, and I will get accused, I'm sure of that. But well, you know what? I mean, that's an interesting deal. It just goes to show you that there's evil in the world, and this gal did what she did, and I do not know I know that I believe South Korea is a democracy as such, if I'm not mistaken, and I may be. Somebody can correct me on that if not, but their system, I'm sure she will pay a price, and my sense is that a lot of the governments around the world, the criminal justice system around the world, are sometimes more willing to hold people accountable in a much harsher way than perhaps some of the different variety of criminal justice around the United States. So it'll be interesting to see. I think that, how do you explain? She tells the family she's sorry. Well, that's kind of hollow at this point, right? So just another horrible situation. Look, the United States doesn't have the market on violence. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
It happens everywhere.
Sure does. Probably not to the same extent. Brianna CC says, Scott is always so positive. Scott, is this true? Are you you just held up your mug. Are you a mug half full kind of guy in general, Scott?
Half full. Yeah, absolutely. And this is probably now empty. So it was a coffee, whipped cream, dessert.
And would you say, out of you and your wife, are you more optimistic than your wife? Are you more of the gung-ho, everything is going to be okay kind of person?
More than her? That's a tough one.
Or you could be equal, I suppose.
Yeah, we do bounce off, but she's pretty positive. She, being a school nurse, she's got to be positive.
Yeah, that's talking about a scary job. You get everything and then some being the school. I know the school nurse by first names. My kids like to go in there. Don Hagerman says, transfusion and pizza time.
Yeah.
LOL, great guest
Yeah.
as always.
Good going, Tom. Yeah.
Phil, you're getting pizza tomorrow night, Phil? Is that the idea?
We will be. Yes, we will be. And we're having actually our Bible studies in our home tonight. So yes, tomorrow night will be pizza night. It will be.
You don't have to go far. If you see a UFO, take a photo of it because once again, Sunday night, I am trying to do a show about UFOs with my lovely mother, Carmela. We're going to discuss if I can get a panel together, which I will, if they are here or not here, and not just in jest, but we're going to look at some, look at this. Oh, a school nurse, says Lorna. Scott knows how to play the heartstrings. Polka Dot says I'm having pizza tonight. Ned Smith says Hawaiian pizza. I don't know what I'm saying. Yeah, we're trying to do a real show about aliens and if they are here. So if anyone spots any aliens or UFOs between now and Sunday, please let me know. Teresa says cool UFO Sunday. And next week, an STS exclusive. We are going to have, if everything goes according to plan, Larry and Kay Woodcock on the show, along with Gigi McKelvey, to discuss their experience. They're, of course, the grandparents of JJ and Ty Lee. And we are going to discuss their, look at this, Ned just became a member. Thank you, Ned. We're going to discuss their experience throughout the Lori Vallow Daybell trial, what it was like for them, and what things are going to look like moving forward for them. So that will happen next week. And Burgess of Netflix Mindhunter fame is supposed to be back to talk about the Menendez brothers next week. So we've got a packed week already.
Oh, boy.
Phil's laughing. Jersey Jen Castaldi, Sunday night with Joel and Carm about aliens. Final question. Is Nugget still sleeping or have we awakened him with our chatter?
She's a her.
Oh, sorry. She, her. I'm sorry. I'm very sensitive. I've always had girl dogs, so I apologize.
Oh. Nugget is very peacefully asleep right here behind my chair.
Well, send her our love. Give her a little scratch on her chinny chin chin. They didn't say this about you, Phil, but Sky Ricky said Scott is a gentleman. Brianna says,
hey, I was an officer and a gentleman, so I don't need anybody to affirm.
And Brianna says Menendez brothers always bring out the crazies. I think Phil seems to agree, but we were going to do it anyway. Thanks so much, STS Nation. As always, enjoy hearing the opinions of the great guests and of the great chat. And, of course, Joel. Thank you, Suzanne. Until then, love you, America. Love you, Hawaii. Love you, Delaware. Have a great weekend. Be safe and stay away from aliens.